let's talk about robots. And more specifically, let's talk about the quest to build a robot's memory. I mean, seriously, just picture it. You have a home robot, and on Monday, it learns you like your coffee black. Perfect. But then Tuesday rolls around and it's a completely blank slate. It has no idea who you are or what you like. It might sound like a small thing, right? But that little annoyance points to a huge gap in today's AI, and it really gets to the core of what's holding robots back. You see, for a robot to go from being just a tool to being a genuine partner in our lives, it needs more than just a list of facts. It needs a sense of a shared history with us. So the real question, the huge challenge for robotics today, is how do you build a past for a machine? Okay, so to understand how we can actually give a robot a past, we first have to get a handle on why they're so forgetful in the first place. Just think about how we remember things compared to how a robot does. For a robot today, memory is basically a database. It knows the capital of Chile is Santiago. It's a cold, hard fact. But a human remembers visiting Chile. You remember the smell of the food, the sounds on the street, the feeling of being there. See the difference? It's the gap between knowing a fact and having an experience. And that's the gap we need to close. So how in the world do we bridge that gap? How do we give a robot a memory that's more than just a database of facts? Well, the answer, and this is pretty fascinating, doesn't actually come from computer science. It comes from human psychology. And it's called episodic memory. This term was coined by the psychologist Endel Tulving, and it's our ability to mentally travel back in time. It's a difference between just knowing you went to a concert and being able to close your eyes and almost feel like you're there again, hearing the music. It is, literally, our brain's own personal time machine. And at its core, an episode is actually pretty simple. Researchers have broken it down into 3 basic parts. First, what happened? That's the event. Second, where did it happen? That's the place. And third, when did it happen? That's the time. This simple what, where, when framework, that's the blueprint for building a robot's personal memory. All right, so we have the blueprint, we know the what, where, and when, but how do you actually build that for a machine? Well, researchers are trying some pretty incredible things, and we're going to look at 2 of the big ones. So the first approach is, well, it's really out there. What if, to help a robot figure out what's important enough to remember, we gave it something, like emotions? Okay, I know this diagram looks super complicated. It's called the HBBA architecture. But don't worry about all the boxes and arrows. The really key part is right here, in what they call the organization layer. This is where the magic happens. The system creates this internal, artificial, emotional signal that helps the robot decide, hey, this moment is important, I should save it, and filter out all the other noise. So how does that actually work? Well, imagine a robot has a goal, let's call it a desire, to get to its charging station. But oops, someone is blocking its path. The system generates a little signal of frustration. That memory, the one that gets tagged with that strong emotional signal, gets prioritized. It's way easier for the robot to recall it later, which helps it learn, okay, that way didn't work. I'll try a different route next time. Now for a totally different but just as brilliant approach. Instead of giving robots emotions, what if we just taught them to write their own autobiography, a complete minute-by-minute record of their entire existence? This is a framework called EPIROME. And again, let's not get lost in the weeds here. The core idea is actually really simple. It's a system for organizing absolutely everything the robot experiences. Every single command, every sensor reading, every action it takes, all of it, gets sorted and structured, kind of like a librarian organizing an endless library of books. And the result of all that organization is this. It's this incredible color-coded timeline of the robot's entire life. It can literally look back at its own diary to see exactly how it did something. And this allows for something amazing called one-shot learning. Instead of needing to see thousands of examples, the robot can learn from a single success or even a single failure. But this is where this story takes a twist. Just as we solve the problem of a robot not remembering enough, a new, completely unexpected problem shows up. What happens when a robot remembers too much? Researchers working on this made a totally startling discovery. And I'm going to quote them directly. Naively conditioning on a longer history often lead to performance degradation rather than improvement. Let me translate that for you. Giving a robot a perfect memory can actually make it dumber. Yeah, this forced the entire field to kind of slam on the brakes and rethink everything. They call it the copycat problem. Basically, when a robot is drowning in a sea of data, it can't tell the difference between what's important and what's just random coincidence. It might notice that the last 5 times it successfully picked up a cup, a little green light happened to be flashing in the corner. So it starts to think, aha, the green light is the key. And then it gets totally stuck when the light isn't there. So the new frontier in this research isn't just about recording the past anymore. It's about intelligently summarizing it. The new goal is to create systems that can take that absolute fire hose of experience and distill it down to its most important lessons, which, when you think about it, is exactly what our own brains are doing all day, every day. So, we've talked about the psychology, the engineering, the weird problems, but all of this leads to the most important question of all. Why does any of this matter? What's the point? It matters because this isn't just about making smarter machines. It's about creating technology that can genuinely make our lives better. Imagine a robot in an elder care home that doesn't just hand out pills. Imagine one that remembers a patient's favorite stories, that knows what makes them anxious, that remembers to ask about their grandkids. That is the future that episodic memory unlocks. Ultimately, what's really at stake here is the kind of relationship we're going to have with these machines. Episodic memory is the key that could transform them from just being useful tools into something so much more. True companions. Which leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. If a robot can learn from its own unique past, if it can build a personal history of its own experiences, what kind of future is it going to create for itself? And maybe, more importantly, what kind of future are we going to create with it?